Now all I've done here is I've taken my coefficients of x and y, coefficient of x in the first column, coefficient of y in the second column, and then the number on the other side of the equal in the third column. And this is a matrix. It's got two rows. One row is 2, 3, 8, consisting of the numbers 2, 3, 8 that we get from here. And it's got two columns. Okay? Each column, this column consisting of the coefficients of x, this column consisting of the coefficients of y, this column consisting of the numbers on the right-hand side of the equal sign. Now, the 2, 3, 8 is understood to represent this equation, and that's very straightforward. The 4, negative 2, 0 is representing this equation. So I do the same thing over here, but I'm doing it to now rows of numbers, and I'm not worrying about x's and y's because I already know where the x coefficients are and the y coefficients. So I add negative 2 times this first row to the second. Now I'll do that in more detail, but if you see this, you probably don't need to see that detail right now. So you might not even need to look at that video. When I do that, negative 2 times this 2 is negative 4. I add that to 4, I get 0. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Added to negative 2, that's where my negative 8 comes from. And negative 2 times 8 is negative 16. Added to 0 gives me negative 16. So by simply adding twice the first, negative 2 times the first row to the second, I get this matrix. Now in the next step, all I do is divide the second row by negative 8. And I get what I have here. Now I can continue. Okay, if I then add negative 3 times the second row to the first, I get this. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3, added to 3 gives me 0. Negative 3 times 2 is negative 8, added to 8 gives me 2. And of course, negative 2 times 0 is just 0, added to 2, I still get 2. Now, what does this represent? This represents the equation 2 is the coefficient of x, 0 is the coefficient of y, 2 is what's on the other side of the equal sign. That gives me 2x equals 2. Okay, that would be the equation 2x equals 2. This would be the equation 0x plus 1y equals 2, which is just the equation y equals 2. So now I know that 2x equals 2 and y equals 2. At that stage I could write the equations down, divide this equation by 2, but what I do is I simply take this one more step. I divide this first row by 2 to get 1, 0, 1. Second row stays the way it is. Now the first row represents x plus 0y equals 1, or just x equals 1. Second is 0x plus 1y equals 2, just y equals 2. There's my solution. X equals 1, y equals 2. Now you should get the gist of this. You should be able to do this step by step, but you should get the gist of this process. And I'm going to talk a little bit more extensively about that in another video. The other thing I'll mention is this calculation I did over here, it's part of what I'm doing, but I don't want it here. I don't want it in this column of equations. Okay, I've got two equations here, I've got two equations here, two equations here, two equations here. The way I got these two equations from these two, well, I wrote that over here because I don't want to clutter up the development of these equations with all the little details that I had to do the arithmetic. So my arithmetic gets written somewhere else. And of course I wrote it over here and then it got in the way of what I was trying to do here. I'm going to write it down in a little more organized fashion and talk just a little more about it in case you need a little more clarity about this process.